Belief systems are some of the most powerful things that we hear talked about in mainstream society that need to change in order for us to change. And there's a lot of talk about belief systems, but really, what are belief systems? Now, I've done a lot of videos around how to change belief systems and working with belief systems, but if we don't really understand what belief systems are in the first place, it can be hard to move forward. Belief systems are created when we are very, very young. We have a period of our life from, depending on the therapist that you talk to, 0 to 4, 0 to 5 or 6, that is called our core conditioning. And during these years, we are much like a blank slate, right? We are soaking up the energies from around us, a judgment that might be projected onto people around us or onto ourselves, the belief systems of primary caregivers, teachers, friends, all depending on the stage that we're at in our development. And as we move forward, these beliefs, they aren't really anything that we have a choice about. When we're 3 or 4 and learn a belief system around good or bad or something like that, we don't have a choice about taking it on. It just becomes part of us. Now, we've all heard a lot about the subconscious versus the conscious mind, and I've said this before on some videos that the conscious mind only has what we feel is about 5% of power in regard to the belief systems and the ability to change. And the subconscious, on the other hand, has 95%. Excuse me. And the subconscious is where these belief systems are stored. And when one belief system begins to change or expand or become more limited or more restricted, it always affects another belief system. It's not like we have one belief system in isolation. They're like scaffolding. They're like a building, and how that building was built. And for example, the materials that were used and the construction and everything will determine the strength of the building or the health of the building and all kinds of things, just like our belief systems. So it's really, really important to know that we all of us have limited beliefs. And I think as knowing a lot of people in my life and working with hundreds of people, I see a lot of similarities in some of the very extreme or the extremely limited belief systems that I think that a lot of human beings share. I think that most everyone, at least to some degree, has what I call a value proposition belief system, in the sense that their value is dependent on performance. For example, how they show up. We often learn that love is conditional. So I have to be fill in the blank in order to be loved. There's a lot of belief systems around love and conditionality. Those are just some examples. But I just took a couple notes here because I don't want to miss anything. One important note to make is that as we grow up and into adolescence and into adulthood, we have one interpretation of the world. And these belief systems often serve, even the really limited ones, to try to keep us safe and comfortable in a very frightening and uncertain world. And so we kind of begin to navigate our world, and we have the perception, which is structured by the belief systems. And this perception is historical. And what do I mean by historical? I mean that my historical perception, for example, just like your historical perception, is based on your history. Again, that early childhood period of life, and then other things that happen in our later childhood and adolescence and young adulthood can manifest as well. But your historical interpretation is made up of your history. And when we come to the table, that history is how we view the world. It is the lens through which we see the world. And so it's always important to remember, especially if we're upset or scared or sad or whatever's going on that feels really overwhelming for us, that we are seeing or experiencing the reality in front of us through our belief systems, through our historical perception, which is very, very limited. Imagine going into a huge dark warehouse with a flashlight, and what you see, the tiny light on the ground, is an example of your historical interpretation, and the rest of the warehouse remains black and hidden and scary and uncertain. And that is filled with hundreds, millions of other perceptions that would change how you are experiencing the experience that, for example, again, feels hard for you. It's always important to remember that we only have that one little flashlight. We only have that one little perspective. And again, before we can work with belief systems, it's so important to know that what they are not just part of the brain. They are not just mental. Okay, because a lot of people have this rational, logical, intellectual side of us. For example, getting back to that value proposition, many of us can say, well, of course, I love people unconditionally. I love my children unconditionally, or my spouse, or my friends. But in actuality, many of us, not because we don't want to, but actually don't, because in those moments, the belief systems that shaped us don't allow us to step into that space of unconditionality. Again, it's important when we're thinking of belief systems to know that just awareness, I can be aware, for example, of a limited belief that I have. Let's play around with an example here. A lot of people worry about what other people are thinking of them. The approval of other people is very important to them, feeling successful, feeling safe, and that focus on the accolades of other people, of the acceptance of other people, is structured around a whole series of belief systems. But you can know that intellectually. You can say to yourself, I'm aware of that belief system that I have, and I can tell that I have that belief system from the patterns of my behavior, which I'm going to get back to in a moment. But just the awareness of it doesn't change it. Just knowing consciously, having the awareness of a limited belief system or set of systems does not change it. And that is where so much of the frustration can lie. And a lot of people ask me, they say, Carrie, how can I get at, if these are unconscious, right, and I'm not aware of some of them, how do I get at my deepest, my most limited belief systems? And what I always tell people is the same thing. Look at your patterns. So pattern is any kind of behavior that you continue to see showing up in your life. It's kind of like a circle, right? Like it has a cycle. It continues to go around the circle and it repeats itself. Now, it might repeat itself in childhood, adolescence. As you get older, it might repeat itself in certain environments like work or personal life, or it depends on the context. But you want to look at behaviors, choices, actions that you continue to make that most likely don't serve you. They bring you a feeling of lack, they bring you a feeling of pain, behavior that you really are aware of. I don't want to be engaging in that space, but for some reason, over time, I can see this pattern, this history of doing so. And if you can begin to identify those patterns, you can begin to identify really some of your most limited belief systems and really begin to work with them. One of the last things that I want to say in regard to kind of the mental is that these are not just things in our brain. Getting back to our core conditioning, the most hardwired, most entrenched belief systems that we have are actually in our nervous system, all right? Because belief systems are all about helping us to navigate the world, helping us to categorize information, a ton of information that is always coming in. But from an evolutionary sense, they came about in order to help us feel safe. And the problem is that the ones that are really limiting and really painful for us might at times help us even in a way that isn't true to feel safe. And that is often why we continue to repeat these patterns. But the really deep entrenched ones are in your body, meaning that your nervous system is constantly surveying your internal environment, your own nervous system, the external environment, like the world, anything that's going on between your nervous system and the outside world. And lastly, anything that's going on between your nervous system and anyone else's nervous system that might be near you. It's constantly on a moment-by-moment basis surveying those three things. That's called neuroception. And when the nervous system picks up on something that feels threatening, right? We have a belief system that if people don't like us, then we're not important or we don't matter. For example, in that case, we would often be hypervigilant or scanning for the behavior or, say, facial expressions or body language of other people. And when the nervous system picks up on something that is interpreted, again, interpretation does not mean truth, that the nervous system feels indicates that is happening, that indicates a lack of safety, the nervous system will respond. So these things are much deeper than just things that are in part of our brain. They are in our system as a whole. Now, again, I've done videos on how to change belief systems, but I always think that it's so important to have a deeper understanding and contextualization of what belief systems are in the first place and why they actually can be so powerful. And they can help radically change our lives, because as we begin to change, Getting back to those limited beliefs, how I said that they're interwoven with the whole scaffolding of other limited beliefs. As we begin to change one of those limited beliefs and expand it, it's not so narrow or rigid, other limited beliefs begin to kind of expand as well. It's a wonderful way that it works. But knowing what belief systems are and how powerful and how much they run our lives on a moment by moment basis is enough evidence, I believe, that belief systems should be very, very important to you. This is not a death sentence. This is not finding out all this information so you can be miserable. This is understanding the power of something in your system and how much that it has power over what drives you, your choices, your actions, your behaviors, and ultimately your life and your happiness. So I hope that this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. And again, check out videos that I also have on changing belief systems, because the change part is just as important.